so with the lap steel, which is an instrument that I haven't actually written for before, one of the things that interests me, first of all, to sort of begin to think in this way, is the different behavioural potentials of each of the hands. So immediately I'm drawn to the left hand because of the bar that the instrument carries with it. So like I'm interested in sort of thing, textures and movements we could get across the instrument by looking at combinations perhaps of rotation of the bar.
So you get...
Yeah, and the rate of that turn as well.
Yeah.
So, and then we could probably, I'm wondering to what extent we could tether that to certain kinds of sort of left-right movement up and down the fingerboard. So could we create sort of behavioural objects at the top which quite intricately oscillate around a certain point with more extreme rotation than left-right movement? Does that make sense?
One thing you could try is a sort of double slide technique.
We've got 2 bars, that's cool.
Yeah.
How much control have you got over the space between the 2? Like, can we bring
well,
them?
let's have an operation on my fingers.
We could have these 2 removed, that would nice.
Yeah, that might help. But no, it's like about that.
Okay, so you can bring them together and push them apart.
You bring them together.
That's cool. Have you got control? How much rotational control have you retained by putting the second bar on this one here? Can you still twist it, or?
Here.
Yeah.
I can. That's probably about the maximum angle.
Okay, but you can bring it.
Yeah, that's probably about the.
Sure.
Then I start to feel it here.
Yeah, then you get tension. Okay.
Yeah, and it just doesn't go much more.
So could we create sort of like movements that are sort of moving expansion and contraction with rotation built into that as well?
Yeah, let's try.
Could we instigate like occasional leaps, so we stay in this territory and then occasionally leap down to the lower end and then leap back up, but it's predominantly here. Yeah, which brings us on with bringing in the bender at the end.
Yeah.
It would, we could start talking about like how we could add to that a separate kind of right-hand identity. So could we go with something, I'm thinking maybe something quite frenetic, that's probably based like perhaps on almost like trills between strings. You can hear how like the 2, or even in this really simple sort of playful setup, you can hear how the 2 sort of things are beginning to combine to create a combo.
Yeah.
There's the difference of the 2. But I'm just actually wondering like about whether we could create some sort of like timbral alterations within that. So like using perhaps the edge of your thumb to stop or mute the strings, but not intermittently. Yeah.
And that's using a little bit more gain. So
Okay.
I brought in another pedal, if you like, which just expands and pushes some of the mids and low frequencies.
Mm.
So when I'm pushing the volume envelope, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, getting some oscillations, etc. at the more extreme levels of volume. But it gives you something to play with.
Yeah. So we're beginning to sort of build up the sort of this levels of activity that are being collided. One of the ways that I like to think about it as well is segregating the instrument itself as from the actions that are positioned upon it. So what, for example, I sometimes have done with other stringed instruments is use like quite elaborate scordatura to destabilize the pitch bearing content of the abilities even of the strings. And so wondered what we could do. I mean, what can we? I mean,
where do you want to go?
How far? Well, for starters, like how far down can we push the instrument?
That's pretty low.
That's pretty cool. I mean, what sort of things should I be aware of with regard to like how something really extreme like that could affect the kind of behaviours we put on top of it? Because what's the effect that would create with putting some of that more phonetic stuff on top?
When you fret at certain points, you can get pitches which are a little bit more defined and have a little bit more character to them.
Adds to this process of the instrument as editor, because certain types of pitches are not going to sound, inverted commas, properly on that. And
well, on that subject, what I'm really curious about is then whether or not it would be a 8-string or even a 10-string instrument that might be more appropriate for you, because then you have considerably more play with the range and gauge of strings that you can play with.
To what extent does when the string is detuned, does the bender maintain a sort of a fixed bandwidth, or does the bandwidth widen as the string slackens? Let's find out.
So that's got a little, I mean, I can feel that lead.
Yeah.
It's sort of struggling to get any kind of grip on it, but it's getting something.
permissible sort of inconsistency, for want of a better word, that you put by putting, say, a couple of strings down and not, because you see what I mean. Like, as you're playing with the patterns of your right hand, the slackened strings are editing that and affecting that in a way that I really like.
And producing something totally different. The other thing you could do also is use an ebow on one. That's fun.
Yeah, that is fun. That is fun. This may be a really stupid question, but there's no. Can you rest, for example, the ebow on, and then?
I was actually just wondering it. I've never done that.
So you can have both textures.
I don't know. I don't know if I can quite get the. That's using the slide, which I've never done before, but that's actually talking serendipity, and that's still going. That's using the tip of the shoved slide to actually depress the string.
Maybe this is a stupid question, but why are we getting that sort of subtone? Because it's sort of unpredictable what the pitch content will be when you do it.
It's partly an effect of the ebow,
Yeah.
and on the setting I've got the ebow on.
Okay, cool. I
So
like it.
that it's actually generating a harmonic off the string as well.
Cool. I like it.
But there might be a whole stack of other reasons which I'm unaware of, and I have to really sit and think about it to get that. And in the meantime, we've still got the buzzing. So and we would
It's
call
the surface.
buzzing the surface. But what that also suggests in terms of play with this instrument is you could actually also use it without any kind of significant amplification. You may in fact just be able to use it acoustically. Not that I'm recommending it, but
It certainly gives you a different sense of scale.
have listened to that.
Someone's mobile phone going off.
Right, okay.
Because you can hear the interference, for me at least, you can hear the interference of the pitch instability. It sort of interacts with that more.
Great.
Cool.
God knows. It's got a very...
It's
Well,
cool.
it's a box of fun,
It is
essentially. It's a box of
bright red box
faux
of
ring modulators and low frequency oscillators.
Okay, so it's a set of
Trippy
oscillators.
circuit bending and little things that you wet your fingers on.
And what so what, each of those buttons controls a different oscillator? Is that what we're doing?
It controls the different oscillators, different ring modulators, the filters, and then depending upon
Okay.
how you wet your fingers, to what extent they overlap a particular surface.
Okay.
I have a diagram somewhere and I don't claim to understand.
I don't think I would ever. But it's and you can control with the different dials on the front. You can control the.
You can. What I tend to do is I take a photograph of the setting.
Okay.
So if I want to use this, what I try and do is get a setting which will produce a certain set of outcomes for me,
Sure.
roughly, and I take a photograph of that, and that stays that way for that particular performance. And I also take the battery out, because as the battery loses power, that also changes and affects how the thing operates.
It's a shame we don't have a selection of different charged batteries that we could try to hit.
You probably could, yeah. But yeah, it's got an actual function on it, which is a battery star function as well.
Oh, cool.
But it's highly unpredictable in a predictable sort of way.
It's
So
controlled well, yeah, semi.
relatively controllable. But one of the fun things I like doing with this, and certainly within an impro setting, is to try and actually get, well, one of the things I really like doing with this, and certainly an improvisation setting, is to actually feed this through the pickups of this instrument and then use the various pedals to modulate further what's actually being done here.
Okay, so so it acts as like another interface.
Yeah.
That's cool. So there's a potential of moving all activity onto that box.
Yeah.
And we could feed that through the instrument.
Yeah.
I mean, how much, if you, for example, how much, if you did like quite, as you said, notey stuff, like if you did lots of like kinetic movement on the box, how much of that is actually translated into the instrument? Should we find out?
Yeah. So, this is
resonance pattern, so the oscillators are hitting pitches which will stimulate these, not just stimulate the pickups, but actually cause the strings to vibrate as well.
Yeah, that works really well with low pitches, and that happened in an improvisation in Dublin a few months back.
Oh right, cool.
Just serendipitously, but I just managed to produce some very low sustained pitches that just totally set this thing off.
See, that's interesting to me,
Yeah.
setting up that collision, if you like, between the stream of info is being affected as it passes through the system is interesting to me. That's cool.
Very cool. Alright,